Hey, is it tomato or tomato? Hey everyone, I'm Kenji, and today we are going to be talking about the tomato knife and what it is and whether you need it. So, what is a tomato knife? A tomato knife is a small knife, almost always serrated, and it's meant for cutting tomatoes. This over here is a tomato knife. It's not that long, and it does have a serration on it, and this actually helps it cut tomatoes. So why do people feel that they need to have a tomato knife? Well, most people, when they go to cut a grocery store tomato, they pick up the knife and they try to slice through it, and they end up squishing the tomato more than they are actually cutting it. Now let's talk about why a tomato knife works very well. A tomato knife works really well because it has these serrations on it right over here. Now, if I were to show you kind of a close-up of a serrated edge of a blade, you can basically see over here that we have the tips of the serrations, and these are the gullies over here. And this sort of straight area is where the knife is actually sharpened. Now, one of the reasons why a tomato knife works really well is because these tips over here are the only part that actually gets in contact with the cutting board, and the cutting board will actually dull your knife. So the thing is that since the tips are the parts that are actually touching the cutting board, the parts over here that are up in the gully, those are going to stay sharp because the tips actually help protect it. Another reason why the serrations help the tomato knife work really well with tomatoes is because the serrated edge actually helps create more of a shearing action when it cuts the tomato versus a chopping action. So when you reach for a tomato and you're nervous about squishing the tomato instead of cutting the tomato, there's really two things you can do. One is you can buy a tomato knife so you don't squish the tomato anymore, or two, you can sharpen the current knives that you have. The two main types of knife sharpeners. One is a V sharpener, which most people have seen. It has a little V inside there, and you slide the knife straight through it and it sharpens it. The other one is getting sharpening stones, which is what they've really used for ages in order to sharpen knives. So what I'm going to show you next is the difference between a well-sharpened knife and a tomato knife when it comes down to cutting a tomato. A properly sharpened knife should be able to slide straight through a tomato without any resistance. Here I'm not even bracing the tomato, and the knife can slide straight through. If you sharpen your knives properly, getting the thinnest slices of tomato should never be a problem. Just look how thin this slice of tomato is. Here we're using a tomato knife, and even though we have to use a sawing motion, it still does a pretty good job. Now, you're never going to be able to get a super thin slice of tomato with a tomato knife though. So as you can see, when it comes down to cutting a tomato knife does work. But if you sharpen the current knives that you have in the kitchen, they will work not only just as well, but they will work even better. Should you buy a tomato knife? In my opinion, no. That money that you are spending on a tomato knife, you can easily spend on a knife sharpening system to keep the rest of your knives sharp. Because if your current knives can't cut through a tomato, you're probably going to have a hard time cutting through potatoes and other vegetables. So are you just going to use the tomato knife for everything and just throw the rest of your knives out? The best thing to do is utilize the knives that you have and just keep them sharp, and then you will be happy with them for the rest of your life. I hope you enjoyed this. Please don't forget to subscribe, give that little thumbs up to me, and you can ring the little bell if you want to get notified whenever I upload new videos. And until next time, take it easy.